Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to join Senator Heinrich in welcoming Delegate Plaskett. I know a strong advocate for her constituents in the islands. I also want to welcome the two governors. As a former governor myself, I always feel the discussion around here is elevated substantially when we have governors on the panel. Governor Mapp, I apologize, I was at another hearing. I didn't hear your initial statement. How are the Virgin Islands on track to get the aid that they need? Is it being a package with Puerto Rico? What's the status of the federal aid?
The support from the federal system has really been good for the Virgin Islands in terms of how we respond to life issues. We are really working through FEMA on the shelter-in-place program. We're having some difficulty there. The feds are putting more money in tarpaulins in terms of $25,000 per unit, but want to restrict the amount for permanent repair at $20,000. So we're trying to work that out. Our presence here and your help, Senator, is essential in terms of setting aside dollars and changes in the statute that permit more than simply rebuild as is.
I'll get to that in a minute, but basically it's on track, but there is going to be a damage assessment and a request for aid, just as we've done for
Yes.
Texas and Florida. Thank you. A couple of technical questions. I was fascinated by your testimony that some of the solar farms survived and others didn't, which indicates that solar is survivable
Yes.
if it's properly built. I notice in the photo of the wind turbines, it appears that the damage is broken blades. Has there been an assessment of whether the all the towers withstood the storm, the turbines are all there? Is broken blades the extent of the damage?
That would be a question I'd defer to Governor Rosillo. He has the wind towers.
And what is that? Tell me about wind, and were there wind farms that survived?
Yeah, there was devastation across some of the wind farms that we had. You would see the blades come out. Some of the towers went out as well. And similar to what the governor saw in the Virgin Islands, we saw severe devastation such as here in Humacao, but we saw other areas that were practically
But the
intact.
question I'm getting at is, properly designed renewables are still a feasible option for the islands.
Yeah, of
even
course.
given the hurricane risk.
Of course.
How about rooftop solar? How did that do?
Yeah, it did much better in Puerto Rico. Again, there's some mitigation strategies about putting sort of a
Similarly in the
walls-
Virgin Islands as well.
walls in the side of it, and those turned out to be to survive very well. And considering this was a Cat 5, a slow Cat 5.
And rooftop did well in the
Yes, and in fact, Senator, because of that, in terms of the reconstruction on the schools, we are going to work with the Water and Power Authority, and we're going to use the roofs on the schools to create microgrids for the schools and put solar panels right on them.
Well, that gets to my next question. Is I think we're all agreed here that it doesn't make sense to rebuild a
As is.
1980s grid when we have an opportunity, when we have renewables. The economics of renewables are so much better. Who makes that decision? Who's going to design?
You do,
the new
Senator.
grid?
You do by changing language in Stafford.
I never knew I had that power.
Yes, yes, sir, you do.
be
You
delighted.
do by making the changes in the Stafford Act that permits it, or in the appropriation and the set aside for the monies for the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico if you authorize it.
That's the second time you've anticipated my question. Clearly, we need to amend Stafford so that it's not simply rebuild what was there before.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And I think there are several bills being considered on that line, and that's something we need to do. But I'll get back. Even if Stafford is amended, assume for a moment, who's going to make the decision? Is it the power authority of the islands in Puerto Rico?
Once the authority is in place and the dollars are in place, then we will work with FEMA, we'll work with the Army Corps of Engineer. In the case of HUD, we will work with them through the process that every other state goes through in setting up what the new profile should be. The U.S. DOE and the Virgin Islands have been great partners in the last 5 years. That's why we know how renewables can work, the test and all of that. So we'll work with the federal agencies to make the right decisions.
Final technical question for both islands, both sets of islands. The transmission lines went down, I take it?
Yep.
Yes.
So that's a vulnerability as
Yes.
well, and that gets back to the idea of distributed microgrids, so you're not so dependent upon major
And underground.
transmission and underground.
Yeah, it certainly does, and in Puerto Rico, as we said, most of the generation is done in the south, most of the consumption is in the north, so you get loss in efficiency as well. It is an opportunity to sort of flip that script.
Well, I hope, go ahead.
And just to add that in the U.S. Virgin Islands, this is the 5th time that the United States government is paying to rebuild the power distribution system on an aerial basis. And this one is 300 plus million just on the reconstruction. So that putting it underground in the main corridors, the second corridors, and having the microgrids and some aerial in the neighborhoods make the system a lot more resilient that could withstand these 185-mile-an-hour storms.
Well, I appreciate your testimony and look forward to working with you. I think this is an extraordinary opportunity for our country to see what a modern grid can and should look like. Thank you, Madam Chair.